And sir, I gotta call at 2:45. So if we could wrap by then, that would be great.
Perfect. All right. We are live with the one and only Olivia Nuzzi. I'm really excited about this interview. I want to thank everyone. I want to thank everyone in KVAR Studio. I want to thank everyone here, and be sure to visit kvar.com. I'm really excited to have you on. I kind of, read a lot of your stuff from afar and really valued your opinion and the things that you had to say. So I want to dive right in, Olivia, if I may, and get right into it. Last night was, and before we get a little bit to your story, last night was insane, and I want to get your take on it right off the bat.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that the president necessarily said anything super surprising in the State of the Union. But I watched it from Iowa because I've been out here covering the Democratic caucus, which at this time that we're talking, we still don't have results for because they screwed that up. But I think the most surprising thing was kind of like the optics things at the end, or at the end at the beginning. The president wouldn't shake Pelosi's hand. Pelosi responded to the end of his speech by ripping it up. That kind of stuff. I think those images are what people tend to remember. I couldn't really tell you much about what I remember from like Obama's previous State of the Union. But I think you remember an image like Pelosi ripping up his speech. And it's certainly something I expect to hear about from the president's supporters on the campaign trail.
It's kind of a little interesting in so many ways to see some of the different opinions come out. But, being both of us being a little bit younger, how does it make you feel that some people abstain from even going, especially some of the younger representatives?
They're welcome to do whatever they would like. I certainly don't know how I would behave if I were a member of Congress, because I'd rather kill myself than ever hold public office. I think, everyone in the Trump era always talking about preserving our norms and, responding to some of the unorthodox ways that he does things by trying to return to normal. That's something that you hear a lot on the left when you're covering left Democratic politics. And so I guess it doesn't totally make sense to me why you would respond to anything that the president does by deviating from norms, like not attending a speech or not standing to class during something in particular. But that's, everyone's entitled to behave however they would like. It's not like people are not willing to talk about it if you ask them about it. But I think all this stuff is generally pretty stupid, all the pageantry. And the president's speech has already been overtaken by the news of the day, with Mitt Romney saying that he's going to vote to convict on one of the articles in impeachment. And so it had a pretty short shelf life. I think normally after a big speech like that, you have like a full day of analysis from people. But right now the news is moving so fast that it's almost like you don't really have time to digest anything. So everyone seems to be on to talking about impeachment and Mitt Romney's decision and what's happening in Iowa. There wasn't like a full day of analysis.
I want to get your take on that, on how fast news is moving. And I'm glad you brought that up. Is that something that's surprising to you, that news moves as fast as it does? Is it shocking? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Because it does turn the page gets turned insanely fast.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's a good thing or bad thing. I also don't really have much to compare it to. Like the first election that I covered was the 2016 election. I started covering the lead up to that in 2014, covering mostly what became the primary field on the Republican side. And news moved pretty fast then. It's not like I can compare it to like in the 90s or, when Clinton was in office. I don't know what it was like then. So I guess I don't really, it doesn't seem good. It seems like it's probably bad. And probably like unhealthy and destructive, and leads to all of us being dumber. But I don't know what the answer to that would be, but it's something that I think about a lot. And I always wonder, I think part of it is the fact that because the media landscape is so vast now, and you can kind of choose your own adventure in what you pay attention to and who you're speaking to. If you're a politician, you can speak to your base, you can speak to a more general audience. It's kind of up to you. I think part of it is like people don't really have to wait for a big news event to pass anymore in order to schedule their news event. They can just do it whenever the hell they want because there's just endless avenues for them to talk to people. It's not like, oh, the State of the Union is happening, so we're going to schedule our press conference for a week from then. You can really do everything all at once, and I think that's part of why it seems like everything is happening all at once, because it just is. But it's hard. Like, I look for magazines, and I'm on a slower news schedule than people who work for papers or who work for the network. Like, I don't have to respond to every little thing that happens with a take, which, like, thank God, because I don't have a take on those things. So I'm not, like, drinking from the fire hose the way that other reporters are, trying to make sense of everything all at once. I try to take a step back because we try and, you know, do the view from 10,000 feet rather than the blow by blow every single day.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting how fast everything moves and how quick the page gets turned, and it's good and bad. But
nothing really changes at the end of the day, right? Like, everything happens so much all the time, and yet, like, at the end of the day, the dynamics in Washington are basically usually the same. It's like on a week by week basis, a month by month basis. Very little happens that actually, like, fundamentally changes the way that things transpire in Washington or the way that everyone thinks about these issues.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, it's just stuff doesn't change as much. But I think the news cycle and just how quickly stuff becomes a story and then fades is so interesting to me, because I still remember the time when you'd hear about a story for such an extended period of time that you'd be like, oh my God, will something else just happen so we can move on from this? And it's kind of, you know, it's interesting because I've lived through that. I feel like the old man in the room sometimes now, because I'm getting a little bit older.
Have that a little bit though, right? Like, I mean, we talked about Russia for God knows how long, right? And that was just every day and every month, and for how long. And I mean, Bridgegate was only a couple of years ago. I remember Bridgegate, the scandal with Chris Christie closing lanes to the George Washington Bridge. That was just nonstop. It seems so quaint now. Like, who gives a shit about bridges and, like, a state governor? But that was nonstop, and that story didn't go away until the missing plane happened. I don't know if you remember that. And that the missing plane overtook Bridgegate and, like, kind of pushed it out of the headlines. So it wasn't that long ago when, like, you would be nonstop bombarded with blow by blow, incremental news about some tiny scandal, right? Like, I just think it's not so much that, like, you move from one thing to the next to the next to the next every day. I think it's just that, like, the news is just piling up on top of all of us, and it's hard to even keep track of all the news that's breaking all the time. Or that's my experience anyway. I don't know what it's like for you.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. You're absolutely right. And there still is those moments where a story gets dragged out. I mean, I think we saw that even a little bit with the impeachment. They were trying so long to put wind under its sails for the longest time. What were your thoughts on that and how that played out?
I mean, it's still playing out, right? As we're talking right now, the Senate's about to vote, probably to acquit the president. It's been kind of disorienting to be. I've been out on the campaign trail I live in Washington, and technically I'm like a Washington correspondent for New York Magazine, but I also just cover presidential politics in general, and the 2020 race. And so I've been out in Iowa for forever, it seems, for the last couple of weeks, going to all these events and, you know, waiting for people to caucus here. And it's been kind of strange to have impeachment unfolding in Washington while I'm talking to voters about, you know, who they like in the Democratic primary, or I'm talking to the president's, like, few challengers out here who have been campaigning as well. It's been strange to watch it from afar. I don't really know what I think about it. I think it was inevitable. But beyond that, I probably won't have like coherent thoughts about it until it's all over.
Until you digest it. The biggest thing, the biggest story, obviously you touched on a little earlier, and I want to get to, is the Mitt Romney deal. Where does he go with that? I mean, he was, my governor in Massachusetts. I mean, where is he trying to go with this, you think?
I don't know. I'm inclined to view any politician's decisions cynically. That's like the way that I look at politics, and maybe that's wrong. So, I imagine that he has some sort of game plan, and he's thought through, how this is going to play out, how the president's going to respond. The president has not been shy in the past about criticizing Mitt Romney. I made a list earlier, just like going through the president's tweets of like all the funny things that he's insulted Mitt Romney with in the past. So I called him like a joke, a pompous ass, awkward and goofy, no guts, a total fool, a total joke, a mixed up man who doesn't have a clue. And that's like before he voted to impeach him on one of the counts at least. So you have to imagine the president's not going to respond well to this, and that Mitt Romney is going into that with his eyes open. You know that. I don't know what his play is.
I mean, that's the $1 million question. I think everybody's trying to figure out, like, where are you trying to go with this? Is it just air cover? Because you've accomplished that, but
I don't know. I mean, he told The Atlantic in an interview, I believe with McKay Coppins, that this was the hardest decision he's ever had to make in his life. I'm sure, I haven't talked to Mitt Romney about this yet, but I'm sure that Mitt Romney will say that this is about the country. He genuinely believes that the president is, quote, guilty of an appalling abuse of public trust, which is what he said today. But I don't know if there is a play that he's making here, what exactly it is yet, because obviously the rest of the Republican Party in Washington is not in line with Mitt Romney on this.
Right. You look at this from afar, and as you said, it's hard to sometimes get into their thought process, but you often wonder, what is the end? Like, what are you trying to accomplish? It's you look at the impeachment deal and you start to wonder, like, Pelosi gets herself really in a jam where she's damned if she does, damned if she doesn't. She's in a tough spot. She can't really win either way. This thing's going to get thrown out today, out on the street, and Romney's still fighting for airtime. And I'm kind of saying to myself, as I see it play out, what is he trying to accomplish? Because now he's alienating his base, and everybody's running from him because everybody's starting to make him. I don't see him coming out of this in any way with any wind under his sails, and that's the end game, right?
I don't know. I mean, the thing, if you're Mitt Romney, though, and I'm just like spitballing, I have not given much meaningful thought to this.
Sure.
This happened, but if you're Mitt Romney, it's not as though the president's supporters are ever going to like Mitt Romney, right? Because
he's vanilla.
Their history together. Well, it's also just their history together. They've sparred before. Mitt Romney has criticized the president openly before. The president certainly has criticized Mitt Romney before. He is not their cup of tea, and he's never going to be, and he wasn't in 2012, and he wasn't going to be in 2020 or 2021. So I'm sure if you're Mitt Romney, you're looking at this like the idea that you would make a decision based on whether or not it would upset the president's base is kind of would be pointless, right? Because they already hate him. So I'm sure that played into the calculation a little bit. But I always wonder with anyone who has run for president before, it seems like once these guys do it, once they get it in their head that they could be president, it really just never goes away. It's why you see someone like Joe Biden, this is his third time running for president. He's 77 years old. And this guy just wants to be president really badly. And the same thing, over the weekend in Iowa, a story came out about John Kerry's been out here campaigning for Joe Biden, and I've seen him speak at a couple stops. And with John Kerry, it's interesting, but he has to remind himself when he's talking that he's not the candidate this time. He clearly one time I was watching him speak at a union hall, he had to kind of correct himself mid sentence from saying our campaign. Because it's not his campaign. But he was overheard by, I think it was an NBC reporter this weekend in a hotel lobby in Des Moines, which is like not the place that you want to have a sensitive conversation the weekend before the Iowa caucus. It's just crawling with reporters and campaign operatives. And he was talking, it sounded like, about potentially running in 2020 himself for president. And I just was thinking, like, damn, like these guys just, they cannot get it out of their heads. Once they want to be president, once they can envision themselves doing it, once enough people have told them that they could be president or that they should be, they will go to the grave thinking that they should have found a way to make it work, or that they could find a way to make it work. And I always wonder with somebody like Mitt Romney, if it's the same way, where it's just kind of like this like beast inside of you that you can't ever satisfy unless you become president.
Right. No, it's an interesting point, and I hadn't really considered that. But yeah, I guess that contributes to a little bit of the psyche, you know. Mitt Romney's an interesting one, and he, without question, has, this crazy conviction. But my big thing is always, we choose the hills we want to die on, right? So we always in life choose the hill we're going to die on. And whether, we look back in hindsight's 2020, or when we're going through it, we're like, okay, is this, how I lose my job or how I lose my family, whatever it is, we choose that hill. And I look at him and I look at how it's playing out, and I get what you're saying. I agree, the Trump support, but it's going to take you 4 years or 2 years to right that ship in so many ways, to get people back into your corner, that you're better off, fading into the background and reevaluating, because you've already gotten your point across that you're not for this. And I feel putting yourself out there on a wire the way that he is, it's going to take him more time to recuperate and reclaim some of that thunder, because there's no question the president at this point has the wind at his back, better or worse, whatever your opinion is out there, has the wind at his back in all this. And it's going to come out that he's going to get he's going to be acquitted on this. He had the speech, which I think Pelosi came out of looking terrible. It's my opinion. I just don't think it was a good look for her. She looks frustrated. She looks angry. If I'm Mitt Romney and I'm in his team, I'm stepping back and I'm saying, this isn't the platform. This isn't the place. And let's reevaluate.
Yeah, I don't know what his thought process is on this. Obviously, it's a solemn duty if you're a member of the United States Senate to vote on something like impeachment. I always think about the images of Nixon's impeachment, and people were a lot more. It was a much more solemn occasion, it seems. This has kind of an element of like WrestleMania to it. It kind of felt like we're watching a sporting event the whole time. I don't know what Mitt Romney's thought process is. He might just think, after this, what am I going to do anyway? I might as well just make the decision that I genuinely agree with. It might be a principle thing, but I don't know. I guess we won't know until they vote. It's possible that he thinks that he is so influential, because at the time that you and I are talking right now, the Senate has not yet acquitted. The Senate is scheduled to vote today. He might think that he's so influential that by coming out ahead of the vote, he'll be able to sway some of his colleagues, people who we previously thought might vote to impeach, like Susan Collins or Murkowski, to vote with him. But I don't know. I have no idea what his thought process is, but he is certainly getting a lot of attention right now. So it could just be that cynical.
Yeah, right. No, absolutely. And I don't think many others will follow suit and deviate. It's a high risk maneuver. It's going to be interesting how it plays out. We're going to have to watch. We're going to wait and see. But let's change gears and let's talk about for a second, because I know you're in Iowa, and this is going to be really interesting for a lot of listeners and a lot of people. Who comes out of this Democratic race and why?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, so far they've all come out of it in Iowa, because at this point we do not have results yet about the caucus. The party completely drifted out. So, it was really insane on Monday night, the night of the caucus, because immediately I think Pete Buttigieg in this chaos an opportunity, and he went out there and basically declared victory. He said he was going to New Hampshire victorious. And among the Democratic campaigns, everyone was like super pissed because they all hate Pete Buttigieg and they think he's really arrogant. And they were just kind of like, oh, this guy, of course he did that. So he tried to spin it like he definitely won. The early results, in fairness, have showed him in the lead, albeit by a very narrow margin, with Bernie Sanders right behind him. The conventional wisdom going into the caucus was that Bernie Sanders would win. His, anecdotally, his crowds have been enormous. I've never seen so many people come out in Iowa for anyone like they have for Bernie Sanders. And in comparison, like a Joe Biden event is pretty sleepy, and an Elizabeth Warren event is even much sleepier than a Bernie Sanders event. But so far, we don't know what will happen. All the candidates are in New Hampshire now. The primary there is February 11th, and then they all move on to Nevada and then South Carolina. I'm really bad at making predictions. I've never been correct about anything in politics, so I wouldn't venture to make a prediction about this. But just enthusiasm-wise, I don't know. I find it pretty difficult to see Joe Biden running away with this. I think it's much more likely that Bernie Sanders gets the nomination, just purely on an anecdotal enthusiasm basis.
Yeah, it's easier to back into it and say who's unelectable, right? And I look at it, and that's kind of where I come from. I enjoyed hearing some of Andrew Yang's stuff. I think he has very interesting perspectives.
It's so interesting.
Yeah, I think he's almost like Bernie 2.0. Buttigieg.
His supporters remind me a little bit of Ron Paul supporters, Andrew Yang supporters. They're super into him. They were not necessarily a part of the democratic process before this cycle, before they heard from Andrew Yang. They are pretty unlikely to support anybody else besides Andrew Yang. And just kind of the way that, they're very passionate about issues that are pretty obscure in a Democratic primary. They're not all hyped to come and talk about healthcare or necessarily climate change. They want to talk about automation, and they want to talk about universal basic income, these issues that were not really part of the Democratic primary discourse before Andrew Yang made them a part of it.
Yeah, what I find interesting about him, and you may too, I thought about this a lot, and after seeing him on Rogan, I was kind of considering, he hasn't if you take Bloomberg out of it, who kind of jumped in late, and you consider where everybody sat the entire race, he's kind of nestled into that 6th position or 5th position, depending on the poll you're looking at, pretty much the entire race, which is interesting.
It's really fascinating. I mean, he wasn't, I know that Andrew Yang was not expecting to have a moment the way that he did and to last this long. But sometimes that happens, I think, if you think back from 2012, the Republican primary field, at the outset, I don't know that it was clear that Herman Cain or Michelle Boston or any of the other many people running were all going to have their own moments. And Andrew Yang has proven to. He's fundraising a lot better than I think anyone expected. He just has the fans that he has. Maybe it's not the biggest group in the world, but they're very passionate and they're very loud. And he's done a really good job of making himself a part of this conversation. So yeah. I think it's been pretty surprising, though. I think going into this, I probably had more. I thought that Marianne Williamson might be the kind of zany-ish outsider with a little bit of staying power, just because her fans and fans of her self-help books and people who go to her seminars are so into her. But in the end, it was Yang who had the staying power on her.
Yeah, Tulsi Gabbard scared the crap out of me in the beginning because, a lot of, but she just never got wind. She never got any wind under her sails.
She's still in New Hampshire. Maybe her strategy of just completely focusing on New Hampshire, and she literally moved to New Hampshire, will turn out to be, has been a smart move. And she's polling there, pretty well, better than she was, early on. She's by no means in the top tier, but she's not like Tom Steyer. She's not at like, 2%. But she's really interesting because right after the president killed Soleimani, the Democrats were kind of reluctant to talk about Iran and to talk about that decision and to talk about war in the Middle East. And I went out to New Hampshire to see them right where I had just gotten there that day, and I was trying to go to as many events as I could to see how they were reacting, because foreign policy is not really a big part of most Democratic candidates' pitches this time around.
Right.
Joe Biden doesn't really talk about it for like obvious reasons, because he no longer agrees with his decision to vote for and continue to support the war in Iraq. Bernie Sanders talked a lot more about war in the context of what we choose to pay for in this country and what we prioritize. And you don't hear much about it from Warren. Pete talks about it within the context of his own service, but it's not like a huge part of his pitch. And so it was interesting. I went out to these events, and you would think that we were not, on the brink of something huge happening in the Middle East, that we were not on the brink of yet another facet of this kind of never-ending war there. Most candidates did not really want to talk about it, and most voters did not ask candidates about it. But Tulsi, her events begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. She talks almost exclusively about the Middle East and about her views on what our president there should be like. And in contrast, she looks really presidential in contrast with the rest of the Democratic field. Because she seemed to really grasp like the gravity of what had happened and how important the subject of our presence in the Middle East is in general when we're selecting our next potential president, right? And it was really interesting to see her, someone who's like broadly not taken super seriously because she's not doing that well, in contrast with the front runners on the Democratic side, when she was the one who, on that issue at least, seemed to kind of get it and get the Democratic base in a way that the other Republican candidates or other Democratic candidates were not eager to talk about.
Yeah, you're spot on. The one that's interested me the most, obviously being from Massachusetts, is I'm shocked by Elizabeth Warren's staying power. I am shocked by that. I can't believe she's been actually in the race for as long as she has, and that's what leads me to believe that entire field is just doomed, because I'm just like floored by the fact that she's even still in the race, because I think she's so unelectable. She's barely electable in Massachusetts, in my opinion. But I look at it and I'm like, I cannot believe she's still in this race.
But she had a lot of support leading up to her decision to get in. I mean, if you think back, like, people were on the left were dying for her to get into the race for years and years. If you think back to, I think it was in 2017, New York Magazine, we had a cover of her literally running in a field, a picture of her running in a field. And the premise being that there was just this huge appetite on the left for an Elizabeth Warren candidacy. And so I'm not super surprised by her staying power, and I'm not, when you see her, when people ask me, like, what the hell is Joe Biden doing and why is he still in the race and how is he still technically the front runner? I just think about what he's like on the campaign trail, and like it doesn't really translate on television for some reason. It doesn't translate like when he's on the debate stage or he's giving some kind of big speech. He's not great at that type of thing. But one-on-one with voters or in a small group of voters, you can see people really, really connect with him for whatever reason. And Warren has pretty much that same thing. I mean, people they respond to her in a way that I just shows personally that people respond to like Pete Buttigieg. He doesn't have that ability to connect with people the way that truly gifted retail politicians like Bill Clinton or President Trump did not really do a lot of like the same amount of like diner stops and little campaign stops in Iowa and New Hampshire as the other candidates did, but she has that ability to connect with people too. And so that explains someone like Elizabeth Warren, who you don't think is electable, that explains her staying power to me in the field.
Yeah. And I say that because, I'm watching from afar. I'm not in the field like you are. I see the things like the infamous beer video and things like that. And I don't say it. Yeah, I don't say it because I'm a homer. Yeah. I say it's awkward. I mean, we're young, we're younger folks. It's awkward. I'm looking at it, I'm like, it looks like my grandmother awkward. Having a beer. Like, I'm like, what is going on here?
But look, the politics is awkward. I mean, I remember in 2016, like, Ted Cruz, I don't know if you remember this, kind of like an obscure story, but Ted Cruz, when you're shooting a campaign ad, you'll shoot like a ton of B-roll, with like, to get the shots of the candidate walking with his family in the field or like whatever the hell you're doing in the campaign ad, right? And for some reason, like 8 hours of B-roll of Ted Cruz and his family, like awkwardly interacting on camera, got leaked online. I think like Gawker published it at the time or something like that. And it was so excruciating to watch because it was just like you're watching the family try and look normal and look natural and look comfortable, but they're being filmed and it's very awkward and they're not the Kardashians, so they don't know how to do that. Politics is really awkward. Sometimes, I think it's very unusual that you find someone who like knows how to have a beer on their Instagram live stream in a natural way, and that person is probably like a robot. Is run away from that person. Not that I'm saying like Elizabeth Warren looked normal or that it was normal for her to have done that, but I don't think that there are many normal people who run for president of the United States.
No, you're right about that. But, it's funny you bring up Ted Cruz because I was doing some digging and I said this to somebody last night. I probably said it for the first time. This morning, I said it to another friend. I was on the treadmill and I was thinking about this and I go, that motherfucker is going to run in 2024. I said, he's probably going to.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I didn't realize you could. All right.
Oh, yeah. I'm explicit.
Let's start over. I'm just kidding.
No. But I said, that motherfucker is going to run in 2024. I said, and he's gotten so much better since 2016. So much better. He's
Possibly.
such a better candidate.
Again, like, I think when you become convinced that you should be president of the United States, you never stop thinking it. Like Hillary Clinton, John Kerry, Joe Biden.
I agree, but his learning curve, Olivia, his learning curve has got the podcast he has.
Look, he's the Zodiac killer. He's a smart guy. He is a smart guy. And whenever you think of his politics, he clearly, I think, to succeed as he has and to adapt as he has through various iterations of right-wing politics over the years, you have to be super smart. And in that sense, maybe he'll prove to be like electorally like Mitch McConnell in that sense, just someone who's really smart and really, really good at sensing what other people want and good at adapting to that.
Yeah, I just see what he's doing with audio and some of the areas he's pushing into, and
the podcast is really smart.
And Olivia, how loose he is on camera now. He's so loose. He looks so relaxed. He looks like he's had the fastest trajectory in the right direction as far as being an electable candidate of anybody else that I've seen. You mean
among Trump supporters?
Oh, of course. Among almost anybody out there in the field that I've seen in the last election. I mean, he's got such a curve going in the right direction. I could see him running in 2024 and by far being the leading candidate. I don't think it's even.
Maybe, but I think it's going to be pretty. I think it's going to be pretty crowded at the. Again, I'm wrong about. I've never predicted anything correctly in politics. Although I did predict that it might be a real shit show on Monday night with the caucus. I'm pretty proud of that. But I think it's probably going to be pretty crowded at the gate in 2024. Like Nikki Haley. There are a lot of rumors about one of the president's children potentially wanting to run. Maybe someone like Ted Cruz, like you say. I mean, who knows? I think there will be like no shortage of candidates on the Republican side.
Yeah, the key to Junior running is going to be Kim, and whether or not that comes to be is going to be another story. Eric, I don't know that he wants it. I know he enjoys running the company. I've spoke very openly about that. I don't shy away from the topic, and I know the man. He's always said no to me. I don't think.
One of the best ones on the stump is Laura Trump, Eric's wife. I mean, she is. I've seen her. She's been doing these Living for Trump events around the country, and I've been to a few of them in like Michigan and Iowa. And she is a really, really gifted speaker. She's better than a lot of people in the Democratic primary field when it comes to just being able to off the cuff, without a teleprompter or without notes, give a stump speech. She comes across super natural, and people seem to really respond to her. So, I mean, maybe it'll be something totally out of left field like that.
Yeah, I mean, if you're asking me, and I'll be very open about it, or if somebody was asking me if I thought Junior would run, I'll say this. I think if he didn't run and another candidate ran, I don't think you'll see it in his father's administration, and another candidate ran, I could see him taking the post of Secretary of Interior. The outdoors is something that's passionate to him. Yeah. It's something that it's always been a part of his life. He's still very young, and that could be the gateway to other things. The reason I say Secretary of Interior is because I know someone he was very, very close with that had passed that was affiliated with the Secretary of Interior prior to, and that's Jason Harrison, who's the former CEO and owner of Kuyu Clothing and founded Sitka. He was involved, I believe he sat on the board or something for the Secretary of Interior, and I know that that's something that's near and dear to his heart. I could see that being a path, and I know he's a sentimental guy, and it would mean something to him if that was offered to him. I don't know that that'd be the case. I don't think he would take it under his father's administration. I think the Hunter Biden stuff and everything else has kind of marred that for sure. I don't see that happening anytime soon. But I think that for the most part, the path for him would have to be one that sees him in some elected office or some non-elected office, maybe. Sorry.
Right. Well, you would know better than I do, but that certainly sounds plausible.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different factors, and you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure this out, and you certainly don't need a private investigator's badge. If you search Jason Harrison's name, Donnie's one of the trending names that comes up right along it. They were very close. It's one of those things that I think would hit home to him, and if he wanted to get into it, that would be the path, in my opinion. It's my opinion. I don't see him going the representative, senator route, the conventional route, right. Governor, any of those seats. I see him going an unconventional route, maybe taking a 2-year post or a 3-year post. Most of those secretaries of interior don't sit long, few years, something along those lines. And then I see it kind of morphing into something else. But, we could debate 2024 till we're blue in the face because it's just so far out. But it is fun.
Yeah,
it's definitely a fun topic.
Who knows what our politics will look like then, right?
Yes, I mean...
And I think, whether or not the president gets reelected, obviously will determine, what politics on the right look like then, and what the left looks like at that point too.
Yeah, it's gonna change 100 times, but I want to dive for a second into you for a minute. You've had a meteoric rise in the columnist and media world, being a contributor to multiple magazines. Why politics, and where did this all come from?
I don't really know. I got involved in local politics in New Jersey, where I'm from, when I was in high school, and I started writing for an alt weekly based in Asbury Park, New Jersey. And I was like a political columnist for them my senior year of high school. And it was a lot of fun. It was really fun for me to be involved in the community in that way. And a lot of people read this alt weekly. It was like very influential in local politics. And I would go to events and people would, come up to me to like argue with me about what I'd written or tell me that they liked it, or they would write letters to the editor, criticizing me. And it was just like the most exciting thing that had ever happened to me as a teenager. And I just basically never stopped writing. I got very lucky. I started getting published in like national publications when I was briefly in college, and then I actually interned for Anthony Weiner on his mayoral campaign, and I wrote about that experience for the New York Daily News. And after that took place, I just basically never kept getting published. I got a job with the Daily News covering Chris Christie and other Republicans like Rand Paul and Ron Paul, and what ultimately became the Republican primary field of 2016. That's when I first interviewed President Trump back in, I think that was in like November of 2014, before he ran, obviously. And I've just been covering him ever since. So I was at the Daily Beast for 3 years, and then I also wrote for GQ and the Washington Post at that time. And then I joined New York Magazine right around the time of the president's inauguration. And I've been there for the last 3 years.
Has that been a wild ride, to say the least?
Yeah. I mean, to say the least, I got my first full-time gig was because of a political scandal. It was because of Bridgegate in New Jersey. And, politics basically never got more normal than that for me. Went from that to covering the 2016 Republican primary, which was insane. The general election, which was insane. And the Trump era has had no shortage of wild things to cover, but it's been really interesting too. I think it's kind of like an embarrassment of riches for a journalist. There are so many interesting people, and there's so much interesting stuff happening all the time that you're never bored. Certainly,
being in the thick of it at such a young age, where does it go from here for you?
I don't know. I mean, I definitely, I feel it's very hard for me to think about anything, including my life in a post-Trump world, because I don't know what that would look like or when that would be. And I also feel an obligation to see this through. I've been watching the president's political career unfold for more than 5 years at this point, for literally my whole adult life,
Right.
And I really feel like I need to, it's my story and I need to see it through, and so I'll continue to do that and to follow the 2020 campaign, and if he's reelected, cover that. And I don't know, I guess is the answer. I don't really think beyond what we know for sure will happen, and we don't really know much about the next couple of years.
Yeah, it's one of those things when you start to look at your 3-5 years out. But I'm always, it's always fun to see someone at the right place, at the right time, at the right age, kind of bringing it all together and getting the opportunity to interview and travel and meet a lot of cool folks. It makes for a wild ride.
Yeah,
and it makes for a really cool story.
I could not be luckier. I could not be luckier. When I got the assignment to cover Donald Trump, it was not considered a super attractive assignment because nobody thought that he would stay in the presidential race for very long when he first got in back in 2015. Everyone wanted to cover Jeb Bush or Marco Rubio or Ted Cruz, people who seemed like they were very serious candidates. And I was sure, I'll cover Donald Trump. I would love to do that. I interviewed him a couple months before, and I asked him then if he was going to run. He said maybe. And then, cut to a year later, he was accepting the nomination. And, before you know it, I'm at the inauguration. And so I got very, very lucky with an assignment that didn't seem like it would lead where it ultimately led.
Yeah, it's crazy. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but it is always fun to kind of sit back and say, where does it go from here and what the next steps are and how does it play out? And it's hard to envision where we are these days, 3 weeks from now, let alone 4 years from now. So,
Yeah.
I definitely think, Obviously, print is something and writing is something that I think is going to have a huge comeback, because I think the rise of voice media, and
so.
I genuinely do believe that. And I know people say I'm crazy, but I think blogging and audio and voice notes and things of that nature, and people, long form, what people are putting out there, I think we're only going to have more audio devices in the home, right? And I think we're only going to continue to grow in that space.
And look, your podcast, right? I mean, you were telling me before about how big your base is before we were on air. Your base of listeners, there's a huge appetite. I think the popularity of podcasts and storytelling proves that there's a huge appetite for information told in like a nuanced, long form way. And it's the same thing with New York Magazine. I mean, I write feature stories. There's profiles about that are thousands and thousands of words long, that are about, who these people are and what motivates them and what they're really like. I think in this like era of tweets and Instagram stories that disappear after 24 hours, there is just an appetite for an antidote to that, and that is, long form, nuanced information. So I think, even though it sounds crazy to say like print's going to have to come back,
right,
as you just said, I mean, radio had to come back to podcast. So I don't think it's the craziest thing in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're and it's interesting to
and
talk.
Selfishly, I hope it does. Obviously.
Of course, and I think it's interesting to talk about this topic with you, being in the media space and kind of looking at the lay of the land. I think people want to consume clips and short snippets, but I also think there's a thirst for long form. What do we all do before bed? You're sitting in there and you're thumbing through long articles, you're reading stuff. In the gym, you're listening to an hour-long show like this, hopefully, or somebody else's, but you're listening to an hour-long show. And I think with the rise of audio devices in the home, the key is going to be audio, and the key is going to be having whatever you're writing is be able to transfer to audio in some way, shape, or form. I don't know the vehicle for that. Maybe it's Alexa, maybe it's Google Home, maybe it's one of those products. But I think the transfer of that, like if I'm able to sit in my house and say, hey, Alexa, play, Olivia's recent article on X or Y, and I can hear your article in your own words. I think that's where the rise of writing and long mid-form media, what I would call mid-form media, long-form media, maybe 3 hours in audio, similar to Joe Rogan or maybe Shapiro. But I think that mid-form will have its place, and I think people will listen to an article, or people will want to read an article while sitting in bed that maybe goes a little more in depth into an issue to get their opinion or to get their point across. Is there going to be a lot of those jobs? No. I'll break everyone's bubble right now. I don't think there's going to be a place for a lot of those gigs, but I think that there is a place for it, and I think that it still will exist, and I think it'll have a place, and finding a vehicle to make money doing it, which is always the key, right, is going to be the secret formula, the secret recipe. But I think for the most part, we're entering a very interesting era for media, not just for politics, but for a lot of things. And I think as it evolves and everybody starts to pull the plug on cable next, which is going to happen in my opinion, I don't know your take on it, I think YouTube and platforms like that, having your own channel and having your own place in the universe, right, is going to be the next step.
Yeah, I mean, fingers crossed. I think that sounds like probably a better way to consume information than what we've been doing for the last couple of years.
So next, you have to make your own channel, right?
Yeah, I'll get right on that.
Exactly. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to the next few months. I want to give you kind of not the last word, but I want to get your take on the 2020 election, how it plays out, where you see it going, and how this impeachment goes the rest of the day.
I don't know. Mitch McConnell just took to the floor in the Capitol, and it looks like the votes are about to get underway. I continue to think, as everyone else seems to continue to think, that the president will be acquitted by apparently everyone except for Mitt Romney. And as for how it affects the election, I mean, I actually don't think that it really will. The election is, pretty far off, not until November. I think if anything, this will just give the president just like he did after the Mueller report, he will come out and say that he's been completely exonerated, though that will not be completely accurate, obviously. And that will rile up the base and activate them for a little while, but will it activate anyone through November? Probably not. That's a really far way away. So I guess the short answer is I don't know what will happen, but I assume that there will be several huge news events between now and the general election that will probably have more of an effect than what's happening right now in early February.
Let me ask it a better way, Olivia. Are the Democrats out of gas to find it? Does it start to turn into pin the tail on the donkey? No pun intended.
Do you mean like?
Are they just reaching? Are they reaching for? At this point, can they come out tomorrow and say we found this? Are they out of? At what point does it become all right? Enough.
Well, I think the issue that Democrats have always had, and I think it's also the issue that the media has in some ways when we publish stories that we think people will care about when it comes to the president's behavior, things that we learned about the administration, that there is Trump fatigue across all parties, across the president's supporters, Republicans in Congress, Democrats, people on the left. Nothing that anyone could tell you about Donald Trump could ever really be super surprising, right? Because he is who he is. And I think that's what the Democrats are fighting against, where it's possible that the president could do something tomorrow that is technically impeachable. But will anyone really be motivated to do anything in response to that, or will they think it's a big deal? I don't really know. People are really tired, and I think it's hard to get people to react with outrage about anything that the president does.
Right. No, you're absolutely correct. It's well said. It's going to be fun. So we'll see how it plays. Well, I guess we'll have to read about it, right? You'll have to write about it, and we'll have to read about it. I guess that's the best way to put it.
At some point, probably.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out of New Hampshire and seeing what you talk about there and how that plays out. I really appreciate you taking the time and just giving some insight into everything going on and how this all shakes out. Let everybody know where they can find you and how they can reach you if they have some type of breaking inside information.
I never have that, but if anyone wants to send it to me, they're welcome to.
Whistleblowers.
You can subscribe. Yeah, love that. You can subscribe to New York Magazine. That would be my preferred way for you to read my work. Or you can find my work at n1mag.com.
And is there an effective place to slide into the DM, or don't bother?
I mean, you could try. I might not see it, but you could certainly try on various social media platforms. But I generally try not to look at
try to get your attention,
stuff like that. But I did see yours though, and that's I'm on the show.
No,
sometimes it works.
I always ask because people sometimes are tough to reach, but I'm sure there's somebody out there that might want to have a breaking story. So you never know. But it'll be
well. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it'll be fun to read about, and I'm looking forward to the articles that come out. You'll be in New Hampshire, and then I assume probably your next stop be Nevada.
Yeah, in South Carolina.
In South Carolina. So I'm looking forward to that as it comes out, as it rolls out. When can people expect your next article?
I have no idea. Hopefully sometime in the coming days, so I don't get fired.
All right. Well, listen, don't get fired. But we appreciate you taking the time.
All right.
I appreciate you shedding some light on all these topics. You're welcome back anytime. And I can't thank you enough for taking the time. We took up plenty of your time, 53 minutes. So I know you got to get to this impeachment, and I know you got some work to do. So get to it, and can't thank you enough. And I'm looking forward to maybe the next time we get to chat.
All right. Thanks so much. Have
Thanks,
a good one.
Olivia. Bye-bye.
Bye.